All right, I want to talk about motor unit recruitment because I don't think it's a topic people talk about enough. I don't think enough people understand it. And it's a topic like many other topics in the training world where, there's a lot of egos in the training world where people don't necessarily want to put themselves in a spot where they express their interpretation or opinion, and then everybody says, oh, you're wrong. I think a lot of people are afraid to be wrong. Personally, I've reached a point, I don't care about being wrong. In fact, I think when people tell me I'm wrong, what they mean is what I'm saying is not the norm or the status quo. It's not necessarily wrong. It's just not the common or popular idea or the one that everybody's grasping to. So it gives me the opportunity to make a case why I'm not wrong. And if I can't make the case, then it gives me another opportunity to see, okay, I'm not saying it completely right. I'm a little off on my message or the way I deliver it, or I'm just off completely. So I do wish people would talk more about, training ideas and things that aren't necessarily the norm, but their actual beliefs, because I feel like it is something that keeps people from expressing their opinion. Nobody wants to be wrong. So I'm going to give you my opinion on motor unit recruitment, and I'm going to try to explain it like I'm talking to my 10 or 11-year-old nephew. The idea is when you lift weights, you don't use all your muscle fibers all the time. You've got many fibers within each muscle, and you don't use them all the time. My goal as somebody who wants to be as big and strong as fast as possible, I want to use as many as I can, especially for hypertrophy and strength, right? And speed, because it's all related to force output. If you're trying to lift as heavy as you can, you need to be able to produce your max force output more frequently. If I want to build muscle, I want to increase mechanical tension. I can do that if I'm able to lift heavier weight, which requires me to create my highest force output frequently. For speed, right? If I want to be as fast as possible, I want to be able to produce my maximum force outputs. The difference in the three that I just mentioned is the load. And the load will dictate the speed. The speed dictates the adaptation. So if this is going over your head, don't worry. I'm going to try to land this plane and make it all make sense. But the idea is when I train, I want to use as many muscle fibers as I can in the muscles that I'm training. That's the concept. The principle that this is based on is called the size principle. Your body recruits muscle fibers from smallest to largest, all right, based on force demand. You've got smaller type 1 fibers that are more endurance based. You've got larger type 2 fibers that are more performance based or power or explosive or strength. Those are, I'm not going to go into the subtypes of the type 2. I'm just going to leave it at that. There's type 1, there's type 2. All right. You also hear people, and I feel like this is interchangeable, you'll hear high threshold motor units. My interpretation of that are the motor units that take a ton of demand to get to activate or to fire. It takes a ton of intent or effort. They're harder to get going because they require more demand. And so this conversation is, how do you create the demand to maximize motor unit recruitment? You can do it in 3 ways. I'm going to start with the one that people probably will buy into the easiest, which is duration. You have a set duration. Every set you do, the longer the duration goes, the higher the force demand becomes. Think about it like this. You're doing a set of 12. Let you think of any exercise right now, it doesn't matter. And you're going to failure. When you get towards the end, the demand increases. All right, there's a million ways to say this. Let's just leave it at this, that the demand to keep going, when you get close to that rep you can't do again, it increases. That recruits those type 2 or high threshold motor units. The problem with duration is it comes with too much fatigue. Fatigue inhibits motor unit recruitment. All right, think about this. You sprint as long as you can, right? You go as fast as you can, as long as you can. You'll never, after that rep, you won't be able to run your fastest anymore. You've got too much fatigue, all right? The reason you can't run as fast as you can anymore, because that fatigue's in limiting your force output. That if you're training, you want to manage that. You don't want to burn out too fast. So there's nothing wrong with this duration. It's just you got to use it in an intelligent way. All right. The second method of increasing motor units is speed. Let's think of the bench press. You put 135 on the bar and you go for nice and slow reps. Okay. When the bar is coming down and you're controlling it, it's nice and smooth. Your muscles feel tension when the weight needs to change direction. That tension that the muscles or that the weight's creating on the way down to push it back up, that tension can be increased if you speed up the downward motion, because now 135 is going to exert more force on your body. It's going to take more demand to turn the bar around. That is a massive strategy that, if you can understand what I'm saying, can be very helpful. That's why I wrote an article about there are no warm-up sets, there's just prep sets. And my idea of prep sets is using that exact phenomenon where you're using the inertia. Think about it like this. There's a scale on the ground. You've got a 10-pound ball. Place the 10-pound ball on the scale. The scale will read 10 pounds, okay? It's a digital scale. Now pick the ball up and throw it on the scale. You'll see the digital number read far beyond 10 pounds, but for a short amount of time, okay? So you're exposing higher demands, but in very short dosages. And this is with lighter sub-max weight. This can be used to recruit more motor units, to prep yourself for heavier work or speed work, whatever you're doing. That is a method, all right? So number one, you had duration, longer duration sets, you can increase motor unit recruitment. Number two, sub-max weight, using the inertia from the speed, from the transition from the eccentric or downward motion in the bench press to the concentric or upward motion. You can use the inertia from the weight itself to increase the demand and increase motor unit recruitment. The last one is you increase the load. If I'm lifting 135 at any tempo, and then I go to 225, 225 is a higher force demand to move than 135. It should recruit more motor units. So here's where it's not so simple. I just gave you 3 examples, right? Increase the duration, increase the speed using the inertia of the loads, and then increasing the loads. All right, the first one I mentioned, duration comes with too much fatigue. The speed concept, using speed to increase motor units. If you're training for hypertrophy, it's not long enough. The tension, even though it's extreme bouts of short duration, high force, it's not long enough. The tension isn't long enough for hypertrophy. It's also not long enough for strength. It's too light. You're not able, on a bench press, you're not able to push long enough. So if you think about, we'll stick to the bench press, when you're pushing the bar, momentum, there's an aspect of momentum. The lighter the weight, the more momentum. The more momentum, the less advantageous for strength and hypertrophy, because you want to prolong that tension, right? Especially for strength. You want to be able to accelerate longer. So that's an issue with the speed. With heavier loads, the issue is, again, fatigue. You're not going to be able to repeat heavier loads as much as you can moderate or light loads. So there's so many options you can use. I posted earlier today that you can work up to a heavy load. You work up maybe to a conservative 1 rep max for the day. And then you take 20% off the bar. Remember, you can recruit more motor units with heavier weight. So you used heavier weight, you recruited more motor units, now you're taking weight off, and you're going to continue to work, by the way. That's just the setup. The pyramid up to your conservative single, that's a setup, because I use it to recruit more motor units, because heavier load recruits more than lighter load. When you come back down to lighter load, those motor units didn't just turn off. they're still active. And now your 80% is flying. It feels extremely light. This sensation I would also describe a baseball player swinging a heavy bat, a weighted bat. You swing it a few times, then you take the weight off. That bat feels like it's empty. It feels like it's air. You can do that in the weight room with weights, and you can structure a program to help drive strength and stack muscle by accumulating more tonnage. Here's another idea. You take a lift and you climb up and you recruit all those motor units with all three, by the way. I use all three every day in some of my programming. Personally, I use all three methods. But you recruit, you get to this highest excitement, you know, your central nervous system, your everything's turned on, okay? And you hit your heavier set to start, and then you take the weight off. That is one of the easiest ways to get a new PR on a sub-max weight, whether it's a 2 rep max, 3 rep max, or 5 rep max, or 10 rep max. If I work up to a heavy single on bench press, that's gonna allow me to set easier PRs at lower weights. That's one way to do it. There are many ways to do it, but if you can understand at least the basic concept that there are, you know, levels of recruitment and that it's depending on the force demands of what you're doing, that can change a lot for you. I would recommend just trying this one method where you build up to a heavy set and then all your working sets are with 80 or 85%. So work up to a conservative single and then do 8 to 10 sets of 3 at 80%, and that weight's gonna fly. Another concept, you can use the speed that I mentioned to recruit motor units, and because of its short duration, right, when you turn around, it's very short, high force, but very short, it's not as much fatigue as a heavier weight. So if you do enough sets of that, a lot of times, I like a 10 by 1. 10 sets of 1, using 80, 85%. You do every rep as fast as you can. And because of its sub-max nature, you're able to move it down fast, and you're able to really be aggressive on the way up. What that does is it recruits a lot of motor units. And then after 10 sets of 1, you work up to a top set of the day, meaning you're gonna hit a max for the day. That is one of the easiest ways to hit a new 1 rep max. If you feel it just one time, and this happens, this is another reason on my programs, I use a lot of words. It's not just numbers, because the words matter. The why and the how you lift the weight matter quite a bit. So if you can trick your body into recruiting these motor units and then use that it's a temporary state where I would describe it, some days when I'm lifting, I feel like a superhero for a brief amount of time. And you use it. And you use it to hit a PR, you use it to build more muscle, speed, whatever you're wanting to use. But last example, I work with power lifters, okay? I might have a lifter open at 350. Well, they're gonna warm up to 375. They can lift more than 350. They can lift more than 375. But building up to 375 and then coming to their opener at 350, it's a trick. You're tricking your body. You recruited more motor units, and this first rep is gonna fly. And it's setting you up for a top set. Obviously, a power lifter, they're wanting to hit a 1 rep max, all-time PR is, you know, ideal. So use those methods. I know something in this video probably at least struck a light bulb. Experiment with your own programming, reach out, ask me questions. I'm always happy to help. But the concept doesn't get talked about enough. And I think the more that I can talk about it and just explain it like I'm talking to my nephew, I think more people understand it and can see the value in your program. So let me know how it goes.